Ethiopia is confronting what the UN calls a full-scale humanitarian crisis.
The crisis in Ethiopia has affected thousands of families across the world, including many here in Colorado. While many Americans celebrated the end to nationalist leadership in the United States, many Ethiopians watched the devastating toll nationalism was taking in their home country. Colorado is currently home to over 30,000 Ethiopians, many of whom are from the state of Tigray.
The more that it gets out, the more...
Millete Birhanemaskel is a local coffee shop owner here in Denver, Colorado. Listen as she discusses how the war in Ethiopia has affected her family, home, and business. Hi, Millete. Thank you for being here with us today.
My name is Millete Birhanemaskel, and I've lived in the Denver metro area all of my life. I was born in Sudan in a refugee camp, and my family immigrated here 40 years ago, and we've been here ever since. I do a lot in the community, and I own this beautiful, magnificent space, or it owns me, Whither Cafe. We're a social justice cafe and African espresso bar. So a lot of what we do is teach people about where coffee comes from. A lot of people don't realize it comes from Africa, East Africa. And then we also support various social justice causes, including supporting really progressive candidates who run for office and that kind of thing.
Whither Cafe is not just an ordinary coffee shop. It is one of the only social justice cafes in the area.
I didn't actually start it saying, I know, we'll be an activist. We'll be a space for activists, right? Even though if I take you far enough back in my history and my family story, my father was an activist. When we left Ethiopia 40 plus years ago, he was a guerrilla fighter. He was eventually a refugee in Sudan, where he still organized. We had a really terrible government at the time, and 1.5 million people ended up dying throughout. There was a drought and a number of other things that happened, a famine. So that's always been a part of I would say, my makeup, activism. So with the cafe, though, I had grown up in that environment for so long that I thought, I know, I'll start a coffee shop, a product business, right? Like, I give you a cup of coffee, you give me some money, and we go our own ways, and that's that. Well, obviously that didn't happen. I would say the turning point for us was maybe a year or so after we opened. There was a young woman, Jessie Hernandez, who was killed in this neighborhood by police. They may have been her and her friends may have been in a stolen car, I don't know, and it's irrelevant to the story in my opinion, but they were in a car. The neighbors called the police showed up, they end up shooting into the car, she ends up dying. It was a really tragic moment, and it also shows you what happens when neighbors don't get to know each other, and it's another reason why we say gentrification is so violent. It's a very violent process, because if you don't know your neighbor's kids, who, their grandparents have lived in this neighborhood for generations, then you're more likely to call the police when you see a kid sitting in the car in the alley, because you don't know who they are, So Jessie Hernandez was killed, and there were a group of people who wanted to mourn what happened, and they wanted to meet at another local coffee shop. And that coffee shop told them that they could not meet there, and it was really tragic. And they did it publicly. They actually posted. It was a Facebook post, and they said, "We stand with police. You can't meet here." And I saw it, and my blood boiled. And so my response was, not only can you meet here, but we're giving free coffee for the entire day. And when I tell you, like, our space was packed, and it wasn't people celebrating, and it wasn't anti-police, it wasn't that, it was they were mourning the death of a teenager, who, even if she did everything she was accused of stealing a car and smoking marijuana in the car, whatever it was, it's not a capital offense. And so I would say that was the springboard to really put us on the map as a social justice space. And ever since then, we've had so many different groups who have organized here, most recently around the homeless issue in Denver, which is a really big problem. We tried to get the urban camping ban overturned. It's a law that was passed by the local city council that pretty much criminalizes homelessness. And so we've worked really hard to reverse that.
Activism may not have been in Millete's plan, but it was always in her blood.
And when I say my father was an activist, my mom would tell me stories of, like, they'd be sitting at the dinner table having dinner, and the police would show up to take my dad to jail. And she's like, the first time she got really scared, and then she just got used to it. And she's like, all right, I'll see you when you get out again. You know what I mean? Like, that's the level of his activism. in Sudan. And then also coming here, doing various things. He started the first Ethiopian Orthodox church here. He would try and teach the kids. I remember after we'd go to church on Sundays, and then all the kids would come over to our house, and he had this really small one-bedroom apartment, and he had this big chalkboard, and he would try to teach us the Ethiopian alphabet. I mean, he was so committed to young people and to culture and identity. And identity is complex, you know, especially for someone like me who is Black in America.
Right.
And that is overly simplified, you know what I mean? And people don't understand the complexity of Black culture. And so here I come, I'm in this world now and identify as a Black woman. And so I have that whole layer, and then add to that the fact that my family's in Ethiopia, and there are some terrible, terrible things that are happening there. And we're trying to, you know, navigate two worlds and advocate for different people, but ultimately around the same thing, which is treating people fairly, you know what I mean? And allowing people to live a decent life. And it's really hard, but it plays into everything that I do, no matter how much I try to run from it. It always, you know, it always comes full circle. And I'm proud of that, actually. I'm really proud that, you know, that my family was able to put that feeling of like, of justice and protection and caring and loving people, like embedding that in my spirit. So it informs everything that I do.
Despite her activism, war has erupted in her homeland.
It was election night in the States, and we did a lot of organizing to get rid of Donald Trump. And so I'm sitting in my living room with a couple of other friends, and actually it was one other friend and my kids, and we're watching as the results are coming in, and we're feeling really confident, and we're like, thank God. It's certainly not the end of our issues here, but at least this incredibly toxic man is going to be out of office, and we could try and heal and rebuild and really address the issues of the country that we live in and love. But unfortunately, for me and other Tigrayans, while we thought we were going to have relief, you know, going into 2021, we learned that the Ethiopian government began a war in the state of Tigray, literally on election night here.
Wow.
So I'm like, we didn't even get one night of like joy, you know what I mean, or of peace. Forget joy, of just peace. And so it really rocked our world. So we learned that the war started and that they were literally bombing the state of Tigray. He cancels the election, but starts a war. Can you imagine that? I mean, you just said you can't have an election because of coronavirus, but then you start a war, and now people are huddled and hiding in churches. I'm talking about thousands of people. You have now 63,000 refugees in Sudan in close quarters. And I just learned that there's an outbreak in one of the camps, a coronavirus outbreak. So it was devastating. It was completely devastating. I have one living grandparent and so many aunts and uncles and cousins and all of these people who I can't reach. We were talking about identity, and it's something that has really, that shook me, because I am from the state of Tigray, but I am an Ethiopian because Tigray is a part of Ethiopia. And now I'm in this place, and it's not just me. Like, I'm seeing this among a lot of the youth here and a lot of Tigrayan children who are now, in their minds, your own government couldn't possibly be bombing you. You know what I mean? Right. And so it kind of makes you question your whole identity. Like, am I an Ethiopian? Like, there's no way. The prime minister said, well, not a single civilian has been killed in all of this. He had the audacity to say that, in spite of evidence to the contrary. And I wrestled with that, and I've never been able to forget him saying that. It plays over and over again in my head. And the only way he can say that with a straight face to the international world is because he doesn't consider us as people. He doesn't consider us civilians or Ethiopians, or, you know, and so I've had this like wild, you know, sort of identity thing happening of like, who am I? Where do I fit into all of this, and why? Why is this happening? You know, and the worst part is now we're hearing the stories. We're hearing about rape on a scale and level that's completely unimaginable. And we've been able to get some information is leaking out. There's one town in the north where there's phone access, and some of those people are able to call out and give information about what's happening. And the stories are devastating.
Millete and many others are now trying to spread awareness across the world about what is happening in Tigray. Here's how Coloradans can help.
Maybe like 10 years ago, we used to say there are 50,000 Ethiopians. So I'm sure that number is much larger. The issue is, how do we identify? So like when we fill out census stuff, like I put Black, I don't put Ethiopian on it, you know what I mean? And so I think there's a lot of confusion with numbers, but at least 50,000 Ethiopians in the Denver metro area. And we're pretty diverse. I would say maybe a third to a half of those are Tigrayans, only because it's word of mouth, you know. Immigrants tend to travel where they know people or where they hear people are having successes. So we have a huge Tigrayan population here. So as a result, we've done 4 protests now downtown. We've had, you know, we're doing a lot to try and organize and bring attention to what's happening to our families.
Right. And I think for someone who's done so much for Denver and Colorado at large, I think it's really important that we are able to show up for you all in the same way that you guys have shown up for us after every Black Lives Matter event, after any social justice event, like you mentioned earlier, your cafe has been a home for. So how can people who are in Colorado and who might have loved ones or friends who are Ethiopian, how can we help right now?
Thank you. That's actually a beautiful question. And it's the question that I get the most, because there are people here who are concerned, and it is so far away, and they are so far removed that people are confused about how to support or how to help or what to do, because the stories are harrowing, and I'm sharing information and people are inboxing me to say, what do I do? How do I help? It's been really beautiful actually to see how community has responded. I had a friend who sent me a gift card for a facial. I was like, that's really nice. So self-care. Yeah, that was her point. And it's so funny to me because I think about how I've always been on the other side of that conversation with activists in the community. And so that was really sweet. But I think a big way is continuing to share the stories about what's happening, because, you know, sunshine disinfects. So the more people that know about this, the more likely we are to have success in stopping it. So that's the big one, and that's the one that I've been asking. So all of my friends in the activist world are sharing and retweeting and reposting, and it's been really great. There are action items too, sometimes to either write different legislators or make phone calls, show up for protests, that kind of thing. All of that is helpful. I just actually yesterday got my visa for Sudan, and so I am going to be going to Sudan soon, probably within the next week. I know, which is sort of a bittersweet moment. I've been waiting to get this visa for so long, and now I'm like, oh God, it's here. So I'll be going to document the stories of the 63,000 refugees who are there now, so that we have more evidence with names and faces and photos and videos to show people like what's really happening. The Prime Minister has blacked out the region of Tigray, so there are no phones, there's no electricity, there is no internet, the people can't speak for themselves. But fortunately, there are people who are able to get away, and so we're gonna go and capture those stories. So I hope to bring that back and then do some organizing around, you know, getting some international activist groups informed about what's happening with evidence so that they can better advocate for the people in Tigray. That's my goal and what I'm trying to do. In the meantime, I think we're gonna start some type of fundraising effort, because we've heard about the lack of resources that the refugees have. So, I mean, think about it. Your home is being bombed, or there's this army like invading. What do? You run. You don't grab anything, you just go. So you leave with the clothes on your back and the shoes on your feet if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. You know, there was a story about a man who, when he ran, he grabbed a dress for his wife because he wanted her to have clothing to wear. He's in Sudan now and she never made it. So God knows if she's alive, no one knows, and all he has is this dress that he grabbed. So we're gonna do some organizing around taking stuff for the refugees, light clothing. It's Sudan, it's really hot. So light clothing. There are lots of children, apparently over 1,000 pregnant women, some who gave birth on the way, some who gave birth once they got there. So we'll be taking clothing and things for babies, diapers. We were able to reach some medical doctors there who were Tigrayans who also fled, and now are treating people who are coming with wounds or, you know, whatever the situation is. And you know what their number one ask was? What? Adult diapers.
Wow.
That was really devastating to hear.
Yeah.
Because what is that?
It's a need.
Yeah.
It's a huge need.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was just so devastating, because that tells me that they were either injured in a way that they're now incontinent, whatever the word is, or like the mental trauma and what that's doing to people physically. And so I was really devastated to hear that the number one need is adult diapers. It blew my mind. So anyways, we're gonna be collecting some of that stuff to take. I'll just have a backpack with my stuff. I don't really need anything. And we'll just fill our suitcases with things for the community. So there will be an ask around that from community. And then when I come back and helping to just share the information.
Checking in with our Ethiopian friends and loved ones is another way that Coloradans can help show their support to the Ethiopian community.
I think that the mental impact has been probably the least recognized part of all of this. You know, we're thousands of miles away, but I feel like I'm in the middle of a war. Yeah. And in many ways we are. So, and I feel like this is going to be, I don't know how this will come off, but the Black community here has actually been more connected and been able to relate better to that, like being in a state of like mental warfare than anybody else. So when I talk about who shows up, it's Black folks. That's who's calling, that's who's checking on me, that's who's asking, what do I do, what can I do? And there have been others, obviously, also who have shown up, but it is the Black community that is saying, we get that feeling of powerlessness. Yeah. We get that feeling of being attacked in your own home, by your own country. I started to tell someone, well, you can't understand because America would never bomb its own people. And I was like, oh wait, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yeah, I mean, there's very recent history that this happened. And so I appreciate that, you know, ability to connect in that way. And yeah, just the mental health check I think is incredibly important. And I think who better than someone who can completely understand that. So I'm thankful for my connections here and being able to connect with other Black folks in America about this. It is still a whole different world, and I get that. And I think people have a hard time completely wrapping their minds around it. But I think being able to support each other mentally is an easy way that we can connect and heal together, you know?
Luckily, this interview is happening in the perfect place to heal.
I remember there was one customer who came in and got a cup of coffee. And, you know, people feel really isolated right now. You're stuck at home. You're being told you can't have holidays with your family. You know, all of these things that make you feel even lonelier than we already do in this digital world where everything is behind a screen. And someone came in and got a cup of coffee and she took a sip and she's like, oh, it's like familiarity. It's like home, you know? And I felt that, you know, I really felt that. I mean, we have really great coffee, but I think we offer, thank you, but we offer something entirely different. And it's community and it's connection and it's, you know, love and belonging and change and hope. And so those are the kinds of things that we try and convey.
Have a good one.
Whittier Cafe is in the Whittier neighborhood in Denver, 1710 East 25th Avenue in Denver. We're sort of sandwiched between City Park and 5 Points. Really beautiful neighborhood spot. And we would just love for people to come here. And thank you for what you said around healing, because I do think that's what we offer. It's more than just a great cup of coffee. It really is a space to come and heal and connect and you know, sort of find yourself.